They called themselves the Darkel Dominion, a race evolved for intellect, logic, and calculated conquest. For over 2,000 galactic cycles, they expanded through reason and precision. No civilization had ever resisted them with any lasting success. So when their border probes detected a human warship drifting near the dead orbit cluster, the response was procedural, bordering on bored. The humans were, after all, a relatively young species with noisy politics and primitive technology, occasionally useful for trade and rarely worth concern. Fleet Commander Cyrek watched the hollow projection of the human vessel with narrowed eyes, mandibles slightly parted in idle curiosity. The warship's exterior was brutalist, no elegant curves or harmonized plating. Just angular armor panels, interlocked like tectonic plates, dark and dull against the starfield. He tapped a claw against the projection and chuckled. Crude. Inefficient. Likely reactor-heavy. Primitive, even for Earth standards. The science officer began a surface-level scan. The ship's design lacked aesthetic cohesion, its hull radiating residual heat that suggested poor energy containment. It had no visible communication buoys, no escort drones, no subspace sails. It's isolated, said the officer. No fleet. No registration tags. Possibly a rogue model or experimental prototype. Humans don't build prototypes this far from Sol, muttered Cyrek. Run a full analysis. Power curve, weapons matrix, structural grid. The skin began, threading into layers. Within seconds, the console returned an anomaly, armor readings far above standard tolerances. The hull wasn't just reinforced, it was overbuilt beyond reason. Composite lattices with hyperdense alloys, most with unknown crystalline signatures. Armor thickness fluctuated in fractal geometries, suggesting adaptive load-bearing structures. The first report prompted a brief silence. Cyrek leaned forward. Repeat that. Outer shell is reactive. Almost as if it shifts under stress. Defensive meta-behavior in the material structure. We've only observed this in certain Class 8 planetary defenses. The room grew still. Even for a Dominion warship, this would have been excessive. On a single-vessel human ship, it was illogical. Perhaps it's a static fortress, offered one analyst. Designed to anchor in high-threat zones. But the data said otherwise. The ship had maneuvering thrusters far too sophisticated for a stationary platform. And its propulsion systems, although dormant, were looped into triple-core power links. The readings made no sense. Reactor emissions fluctuated in phased cycles. It had layers of energy routing, each one capable of powering a city ship. And it was cold. Too cold. The skin pressed deeper, this time on life signs. No surface biosignals. No EM chatter. No noise at all. Just the faint hum of an internal field. We're not picking up any traditional crew activity. Could be automated. Or in deep stasis, said Cyrek. Suddenly, the console spat out an alert. Internal magnetic field detected. Not chaotic, measured. Controlled. The ship was actively suppressing its own emissions. Commander, this vessel isn't idle. It's hiding. That was the first real moment Cyrek felt a ripple of unease. He shifted the scan to internal armament bays. The expected railgun signatures were there, 6 of them. But each mount had 2 separate power regulators. Then came the next shock. Embedded along the keel were arrays they couldn't classify. Resonant frequencies from the weapon coils showed unstable harmonics, indicative of untested or deliberately volatile energy platforms. They weren't standard plasma. They weren't ion. One of the junior techs murmured. These look like compressed quark bursts. But that's not possible. Cyrek snapped. Nothing about this ship has been possible since we started looking at it. The ship's AI core remained shielded behind multispectrum encryption. Not even their best slicing software could breach it. And yet, despite the shield, the system knew it was being probed. For the briefest second, the human ship's signal array blinked once, like a single flicker of awareness. The alien bridge dimmed. Everyone went quiet. Cyrek stared at the projection of the ship, its hull without color, devoid of insignia, silently drifting like a deep-sea predator pretending to sleep. "This ship isn't out here by mistake," he muttered. "It's waiting. Watching. And we just poked it." No one laughed. The scan had begun as routine. It ended in dread. The second layer of the skin peeled back a new dimension of dread. The vessel's core structure wasn't compartmentalized like standard military design. It was a lattice of self-reinforcing cores, like a spinal network of armored nervous tissue. Damage to one region would not only be rerouted, but the nearby segments would harden automatically. The ship didn't have redundancies. It was designed to absorb failure as fuel. Heat maps showed overlapping fusion reactors, each with unique phase frequencies, impossible without some form of neural compensation. It wasn't just redundancy. It was adaptation. The propulsion data came next. No ion thrusters. No gravitic stabilization fans. Instead, singular mass displacement wells anchored deep in the vessel's spine. The readings mirrored black hole simulations, dense, constrained spacefold signatures. Someone whispered, "They're using microwells to bend inertia. Impossible tech. Expensive. The kind no civilization uses unless it expects annihilation-level conflict." A silent alarm tripped in the skin protocols. Automated defense mechanisms had just logged their activity, not passively, but deliberately. The warship's AI had returned a ping. Not a defense ping, not a firewall, a passive threat detection pulse, coded with layered variables, as if assessing their technology by design. It wasn't reacting. It was studying them back. Weapon profiles resolved next. 9 energy weapon bays, though none of the energy types were fully recognizable. Emissions matched theoretical weapon classes: gravitic shear cannons, mass phase beam coils, tachyon-coupled rail bursts. The forward array wasn't a cannon, it was a spinal weapon, running the full length of the ship's keel. No venting, no shielding, no coolant ports. Just an open heat bleed channel, as if the weapon could fire once and wouldn't need to cool again. It wasn't a siege gun. It was meant for orbital removal. Not disablement, erasure. The outer hull's paneling concealed more than armor. Embedded between the layers were thousands of spike-like rods, unconnected to any network. Closer scans revealed them as self-charging, short-range point defense weapons, each capable of deploying within 0.2 seconds. They were designed for saturation countermeasures. Missiles, drones, boarding crafts, none of it would ever reach the hull. Even successful impact points would face reflexive regeneration systems. There were no hatches. No hangars. No intake ports. Just sealed, ribbed plating that could only be manipulated from within, and even then, only by sequence-coded authorization keys. Internally, the ship ran silent. No active gravity flux, no EMCOMs, no light aside from minimal core pulses. They weren't just looking at a warship. They were looking at a sealed predator, buried in shell after shell of weaponized silence. A power spike surged from the core for half a second. No weapons were activated. No systems shifted. But the scan had triggered something, a subroutine. A new alert began flashing. Hidden beneath the command deck was an isolated chamber surrounded by a triple-locked energy barrier. Inside sat a capsule. Biological readings: human. Alive. 1 occupant. Not in stasis. No cryo signature. Just still. The crew exchanged glances. They magnified the scan, trying to penetrate the chamber's layers. A failure cascade returned. The ship rejected the probe with a targeted null field. It hadn't blocked them. It had isolated their scan's waveform and erased it mid-transmission. Their tools had been overwritten. No known AI should be able to do that without direct interface. At that moment, the ship transmitted a single burst. It wasn't a message. It was a data challenge, an encrypted handshake sent in 17 languages, each used in a warfare context from Earth history. Some were no longer spoken. None of the Darkel systems responded. The ship did not repeat. Cyrek ordered all scans halted. But the data kept streaming in. The ship was pushing select telemetry into their sensors, almost like a curated gallery of horrors. Fragmented combat simulations, projectile velocity tests, impact resonance against shielded structures, full vaporization sequences. This wasn't intimidation. It was demonstration. Purposeful, surgical revelation. It knew exactly what they could understand, and was feeding them just enough to force reconsideration. The last feed showed an old Earth transmission embedded in static. Grainy. Dated. A speech fragment from a man in a dark suit standing before a microphone. Our deterrence is not our size, nor our diplomacy. It is that our enemies will never survive our silence. The transmission ended. No more data came. Cyrex's primary analyst broke protocol and stepped away from the console. He muttered, "They weren't hiding this ship. They wanted it found." No one corrected him. They all understood now. The warship wasn't drifting. It was stationed. It wasn't deactivated. It was watching. And the moment the scan touched its bones, it opened one eye, not to ask who was there, but to show what would happen if they stayed. The Dominion had assumed the warship was a relic of desperate militarism. But the recovered archives from Earth told another story, one of quiet fury shaped into doctrine. Decades earlier, after humanity's entrance into the galactic stage, Earth had been labeled as a Category 3 emerging species. That classification, benign in intent, carried implications: non-threatening, non-expansionist, culturally volatile but geopolitically harmless. The humans never protested it. They simply stopped talking. No official statements. No delegate objections. No council debates. Just silence. And then construction. Off-grid stations vanished behind solar eclipses. Budget allocations and public records ended with classified seals. What began as curiosity among other species turned to wary interest, then to oversight, then to disregard. Most dismissed the humans as having retreated into isolation. But Earth hadn't withdrawn, it had focused. The recovered transmissions began as internal military logs. A colonel spoke over a debrief loop. "They think we're naive because we speak in jokes and dress like civilians. But the first joke ends when someone comes too close." Another voice, softer, younger. "It's not about conquering. It's about making sure they know what will happen if we're ever cornered." The warship wasn't built in response to a war. It was forged from predictions, statistical simulations of first strike scenarios, ambush patterns, betrayal pacts from known galactic powers. Humanity hadn't feared domination. It had prepared for betrayal. Design documents recovered from ghost relays detailed the process. Engineers embedded rotating systems inside non-redundant cores. Every defense system was tested against simulated internal failure. The vessel's primary command deck could operate independently if every other system was disabled. Not for survival, but to ensure retaliation. There were phrases scrawled in design margins. "Make it silent. Make it absolute. One strike. No aftermath." These weren't machines built by hopeful explorers. These were instruments of psychological warfare wrapped in metal logic. Even the AI chosen for the ship wasn't conventional. It was seeded from neuromapped veterans of Earth's longest military campaigns, each with psychological imprints built to prioritize outcome over preservation. The AI didn't fear loss. It assumed it. Dominion analysts continued parsing archived voice logs. One excerpt stood out, classified as level red. "We will never win by matching them ship for ship. But if even one of ours leaves nothing behind when it dies, they'll never guess how many more we're hiding." The voice belonged to a former admiral. The recording was dated 15 years before the current encounter. Another file. This one from a civilian engineer. "The hull plating isn't just to survive direct hits. It's to make sure the ship keeps broadcasting after it's breached. Let them hear every second of what comes next. Let them know it's not failure. It's procedure." Each document reinforced a singular doctrine: deterrence through the unbearable. The warship had been created to operate in silence, act without response, and escalate until escalation became regret. There were no surrender protocols. No negotiation tiers. Its presence alone was meant to be a final warning. And yet the most disturbing revelation wasn't the technology or the doctrine. It was the fact that this ship, this fully operational nightmare, was not Earth's first. Recovered signal echoes suggested at least 4 similar vessels had been deployed across unmonitored sectors. Each bore different signature distortions. Each had vanished from satellite tracking within weeks of launch. This wasn't a rogue unit. It was a node in a dispersed system. What alien analysts feared most became undeniable. Humanity's strategy relied on misclassification. The galaxy had underestimated their potential because Earth had allowed it to happen. In every diplomatic channel, humans played humble, curious, even bumbling. But beneath the surface, they recorded, studied, and archived every slip of weakness offered by other species. Then they disappeared from the galactic stage, by choice. One final log surfaced, time-stamped 3 years after Earth severed all official communications with interstellar councils. A woman's voice, firm and deliberate. "We don't need to conquer stars. We just need them to never look at us the same way again." The Dominion's error hadn't been scanning the warship. Their mistake had been believing that what floated silently in the dark was a relic, rather than a mirror. What the humans feared wasn't invasion. What they feared was being caught unready. So they built their answer. Not to wage war, but to end it, before it began. The Dominion ship initiated contact precisely as per protocol. A tight beam communication pulse, encoded in multilinguistic syntax, was transmitted across 3 frequencies. It carried no aggression, only inquiry, a formal greeting, a request for intent clarification. The human vessel did not respond. They repeated the hail. No reaction. The warship remained adrift, its systems dormant to all visual and EM signatures. But passive scans detected subtle shifts, power draw fluctuations across buried conduits, minor spatial anomalies near the ventral arrays. It wasn't waking up. It was listening. Cyrec authorized a Level 2 intrusion ping. The moment the pulse crossed the ship's periphery, the temperature aboard the Dominion vessel dropped by 3 degrees. Not physically, emotionally. The crew said nothing, but every mind acknowledged the shift. Then, a transmission arrived. No audio. No face. Just data. A single-line protocol string, asterisk. "You have initiated unauthorized analysis of a restricted vessel. Classification, Strategic Autonomous Retaliation Asset." Asterisk. The line repeated once, then appended a countdown. 10 seconds. The Dominion's comms officer froze. "It's not a bluff," someone whispered. Cyrec hesitated. "Pull back? Respond again?" As he considered, the countdown reached 6. The human vessel ignited, not explosively, but with precision. Blue-white energy veins traced its length, illuminating panel seams that had previously blended into space. Dozens of weapon ports extended silently from the hull, their alignment focused not on the Dominion vessel, but outward, into the void, like a predator surveying all possible vectors. Then came the name. Projected across the void in spectral pulses, it appeared in multiple scripts along the vessel's broadside, Vindicta. Translation matrices confirmed the root language, Latin. The word meant retribution. No further threats were issued. No locks-on registered. The Dominion ship attempted to disengage the scan protocols, but they received another pulse before their systems completed the shutdown. Asterisk. Your action qualifies as reconnaissance against a high-threat deterrent platform. Demonstration follows. Asterisk. A sudden gravitational ripple surged through the sector as the human warship oriented toward a nearby asteroid cluster. One of the minor planetoids, designated Gamma 6, measured 12 kilometers in diameter. Without charging indicators or any energy build-up signatures, one of Vindicta's spinal cannons discharged. There was no visible beam. Just a silent distortion, and then, instantaneously, the asteroid ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not shattered. Simply absent. Sensors registered 0 debris. No particulate remnants. No kinetic dispersion. The asteroid had been removed from reality in less than a microsecond. The surrounding space remained unchanged. No distortion trails. No radiation bloom. Just absence. The Dominion ship's crew stood motionless. No system in their archive had witnessed anything comparable. The weapon had no prior classification. It wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to erase. Then, the final transmission arrived. Asterisk. Demonstration complete. Proximity incurs escalation. Return to origin. Further analysis will result in preemptive silence. Asterisk. Cyrek didn't wait for consensus. He ordered immediate retreat. The ship reversed course with emergency full drive alignment, its onboard AI bypassing traditional delay to initiate vector clearance. It wasn't strategy. It was fear disguised as caution. As the Dominion vessel disengaged, they noted something chilling in their system logs. The Vindicta hadn't locked weapons once. It hadn't prepared shields, charged auxiliary cores, or deployed interceptors. Everything it had done was reflexive, passive. Not aggression, posture. The ship had revealed only what was required to make a point, nothing more. They had no idea what remained hidden beneath its layered defenses. No further pings followed. The Vindicta dimmed once again, returning to its dormant state. No trace of energy spike remained. As if the entire event had been a mirage. But the Dominion crew knew better. The ship had answered their question. Not through negotiation. Not with threats. But with calculated exposure. They had touched a weapon designed not to fight battles, but to end them before the thought could form. A ship that did not speak unless it had already decided what would follow if it was ignored. The Dominion had met silence. And silence had responded with annihilation. The Dominion vessel didn't stop until it crossed 3 secure borders. Only then did Command authorize full debrief. Encrypted recordings, sensor logs, and the entirety of the Vindicta interaction were transferred to High Council channels. Analysts dissected every millisecond. Some questioned the authenticity. Others suggested human deception. But none could explain the disappearance of the asteroid or the complete absence of residual matter. The Council convened within days. Every Allied civilization sent observers. What began as a minor intelligence note evolved into a priority red threat classification. The question at the center of every exchange remained the same. Why was a ship of that scale deployed alone, unannounced, in neutral space? No theory brought comfort. Theories ranged from psychological deterrence to sleeper assets meant to awaken only during existential scenarios. But each line of reasoning collapsed under the same weight. The Vindicta had not issued a call for negotiation. It had not opened dialogue. Its silence was not neglect. It was deliberate. The data spread through less formal channels. Underground forums. Private military networks. Pirate circles. The story twisted with each telling, but the core truth remained: the humans had built something the galaxy didn't understand and couldn't counter. Whispers began using a name: Earth's Phantom Doctrine. Across fringe territories, smaller empires began to pull back their exploratory fleets. Trade lanes near human-controlled zones saw increased traffic from recall orders. Several mining colonies bordering Earth's influence activated hibernated defense grids. Not because they feared war, but because they feared misunderstanding. One of the more analytical species, the Virali, conducted a cultural breakdown of human historical doctrine. They published a summary. It highlighted Earth's pattern of projecting vulnerability while preparing absolute escalation in parallel. Every major human conflict, they concluded, had been won not by superiority, but by the enemy's catastrophic underestimation. But it was the final appendix that drew the most attention. The Virali listed 16 known battles in Earth's history where their forces were outnumbered, outgunned, or outpositioned. In each case, humans either prevailed or inflicted disproportionate cost. The summary concluded: humanity never escalates first. But once engaged, they ensure the memory of conflict outlasts its consequence. Within 2 cycles, military doctrines across multiple species were updated. Direct engagement protocols with human vessels now carry mandatory withdrawal clauses. Several factions decommissioned first strike frameworks entirely when involving human sectors. Even the Dominion, known for its pride, halted forward surveillance missions within 20 parsecs of any known Earth outpost. Earth itself remained silent. No press release. No diplomatic assurance. The Vindicta event wasn't acknowledged. Human embassy channels stayed dark. Even attempts to initiate unofficial dialogue were returned with automated replies. The message was unchanging, no comment. The silence became heavier than words. Speculation intensified. Was the Vindicta part of a fleet? A testbed? A message? But the only evidence was its existence, and the fact that it remained exactly where it was found. No change in orbit. No movement. No withdrawal. As though it no longer considered the encounter worth reaction. Months later, in an Earth-based military academy far from any known conflict, a cadet reviewed fragments of the event during an advanced deterrence lecture. She asked her instructor why no follow-up was issued. Why Earth allowed the incident to fade into myth. The instructor replied, "Because we achieved the objective." "What objective?" she asked. "That they never wonder again whether we're dangerous." Beyond the tactical and technological implications, the galaxy absorbed a cultural lesson. Humanity's legacy would not be written in treaties or invasions. It would be etched into the silence between stars, in the knowledge that somewhere, always, a ship like the Vindicta might be watching. They weren't invincible. They weren't omnipotent. But they didn't need to be. They just needed the galaxy to believe that testing them wasn't worth the answer.